The night I came back to Chicago, I still had a fever burning under my skin and a suitcase full of gifts I had bought in Phoenix for Graham's family. The wind off Lake Michigan cut through my coat as I stood near Navy Pier. One hand wrapped around the handle of my luggage, the other holding my phone because Graham had just texted, "I'm close." For one foolish second, I let myself believe my husband had checked my landing time, remembered I was sick, and decided to be kind without being asked. Then his black SUV slid to the curb, clean and warm behind tinted glass, and the passenger door stayed locked. I stepped closer with a small smile already dying on my face. But Graham only lowered the window halfway, his eyes moving over my wet coat before they moved to my face. "You need to call a car. Elise. I have to meet a major sponsor, and I can't show up with you dripping all over the seat." The sentence landed flat. Not angry enough to fight. Not gentle enough to forgive. And that made it worse. Behind him, on the passenger seat, a cream cashmere scarf sat folded beside a glossy cosmetics bag, and the lid of a latte still carried a red crescent of lipstick that was not mine. I looked at the scarf first because it had a single letter stitched into the corner. A soft gold B that seemed brighter than the streetlights around us. "Who was in my seat?" My voice came out rough from the fever, but clear enough for him to hear every word. Graham's jaw tightened, and instead of answering, he glanced toward the traffic building behind him like I was the problem blocking the lane. "Elise!" "Not tonight. I don't have the energy for your mood." Then he rolled the window up while I was still standing there with my hand near the door handle. The SUV pulled away too fast, its back tire slicing through a dirty puddle and throwing cold water across the hem of my coat. I did not run after him, and I did not call his name, because the proof had already spoken in a language even a tired wife could understand. My place in his life was not empty anymore. It had been taken, warmed, and driven away while I was still standing outside with the gifts. I did not make it home that night. A young barista near Navy Pier found me by my suitcase. Coat soaked through. Phone clenched in my hand. The fever turned the water lights into white smears. And when I tried to stand, my knees folded before my pride could catch me. When I opened my eyes again, I was on Dana Avery's sofa in Lincoln Park. Wrapped in blankets, Dana sat beside me with my phone on her palm, pale and angry. "Do you want the truth, Elise?" I looked at the screen before answering, because some truths arrive without a voice. No missed calls from Graham. No worried texts. No voicemail asking where his wife had gone after he left her by the lake. The only thing from him was an email reminding me to confirm Celia's guest list. Dana reached for his name, but I closed my fingers around her wrist. "Don't. Not yet." My voice sounded weak, but something inside it had gone steady, like a lock turning from the other side. I signed into the rewards account Graham and I had shared since our first anniversary, the one he called harmless, because points were just points. The page loaded slowly, then gave me what he had not. There were riverfront hotel nights under his business code, when he claimed client dinners had run late. There were charges for 2 breakfasts, floral delivery notes with Brielle Sutton's name, and a private car receipt to an unknown address. One charge could be explained, and one name could be coincidence. But the scarf with the gold B had taught me how coincidence looks in your seat. Dana whispered, "How long are you going to let him write your life for you?" I kept scrolling until the letters blurred. Not from fever, but from seeing my marriage itemized in receipts. Graham had not forgotten me because he was busy. Another version of his life had made room for itself. I saved every confirmation and answered, "I'm not letting him. I'm reading the draft before I tear it up." I went back to the Gold Coast townhouse when the fever had finally loosened its grip, but I did not tell Graham I was coming. The front steps looked exactly the same. Polished stone. Black railings. The brass number plate Celia had once called tasteful, but my hand felt different when I touched the key. Graham opened the door with panic flashing across his face for one clean second before he covered it with concern. He pulled me into an embrace too tight to be tender and murmured, "Elise, where have you been? I thought you stayed with Dana to rest." That sentence told me more than his arms did. I had never told him I was at Dana's, and he had never cared enough to ask until I stood in front of him. I let him hold me for another breath, then stepped inside and looked past his shoulder at the house we used to call ours. The rooms were too neat. Too still. Like a hotel suite reset after a guest checked out. Graham kept asking if I needed tea, soup, anything. But his voice had the smooth pressure of a man trying to keep me away from the second floor. I went upstairs anyway. The bedroom smelled wrong before I saw anything wrong. Sweet and heavy. Nothing like the clean linen spray I used because strong perfume made my head ache. The sheets had been changed. The pillows sat too perfectly. And a small vase of white flowers stood on my dresser, though I never bought flowers for that room. Near the leg of the vanity, half hidden against the rug, I saw a single fake pearl earring with a gold back. I picked it up, and Graham's face emptied before he forced a laugh. "That's probably from the cleaning service. They must have sent someone new while you were gone." He reached for it, but I closed my fist before his fingers touched my palm. The old service was still on our payment schedule. The sheets were fresh. The perfume was in the curtains. And the earring was lying in the one room. No stranger had any reason to enter. I smiled, placed it in a small zip pouch from my purse, and said, "Then remind them not to leave their things in my bedroom." I called Marissa Vale before I let anger make a decision for me. Her office sat above a quiet street in River North. All glass, gray carpet, and the kind of silence that made every paper on her desk feel heavier. I placed the zip pouch with the earring beside the printed hotel rewards confirmations, then slid my phone across with Graham's email about Celia's guest list still open. Marissa read without blinking, then looked at me and said, "Elise, pain is not evidence, but this is where evidence starts." She did not let me confuse justice with impulse. If I recorded Graham in private without consent, if I grabbed files I had no right to access, if I posted Brielle's name online before the facts were locked down, he could turn my own anger into his defense. Marissa wrote nothing dramatic. Only clean notes. Shared rewards account. Marital home. Visible item in bedroom. Business code. Guest list email. Repeated hotel activity. "Don't give him a scene," she said, closing the folder with one hand. "Give me a record." That was how I met Rowan Pierce 2 days later. In a coffee shop where no one looked twice at 3 people speaking softly over paper cups. He was Graham's distant cousin, 34. Lean. Composed. With the tired eyes of a man who had watched the right thing lose before. Rowan did not pretend he was there out of pure kindness. Graham had once buried his report about inflated event expenses, then made him look careless in front of people who mattered. And Rowan carried that history like a scar under a pressed shirt. "I know how he moves money through hospitality favors without calling it money," Rowan said, keeping his voice low while Marissa watched me absorb every word. He would not hand me stolen documents, and Marissa would not have taken them if he tried. What he gave me was cleaner and more useful: which vendors kept delivery logs, which hotel departments preserved booking notes, which sponsor invoices could be requested if a lawyer asked before anyone had time to tidy them. For the first time since Navy Pier, my hands stopped trembling. Graham had left fingerprints everywhere, not because he was careless, but because he had never believed I would learn how to read them. Graham asked me to attend the hospitality gala like he was offering peace, not borrowing my face for damage control. He stood in our bedroom doorway while I fastened a simple black dress, his phone lighting up in his hand, and told me the sponsors had been sensitive lately. Celia called 10 minutes later with her polished warning that families should look united when people were watching. I listened to both of them and understood exactly why I had been invited. The ballroom was all glass, warm lights, white flowers, and people who smiled with their teeth while measuring every name tag. Graham kept his hand at the small of my back, guiding me from sponsor to sponsor, introducing me as if I had not spent the past week learning how easily he could erase me. Brielle Sutton stood near the luxury gift table in a champagne dress, her brand badge pinned neatly above her heart. She did not rush toward Graham, but she stayed close enough for her perfume to reach him before she did. The first crack came from a sponsor's wife holding one of Brielle's glossy gift bags. She touched my arm and said the riverfront suite last week must have been gorgeous, especially with the floral upgrade Graham had arranged. I felt Graham's fingers stiffen against my back, and that small pressure told me the question had landed somewhere dangerous. I smiled at her and answered, "That sounds beautiful, but I wasn't in that suite." The woman blinked, then looked past me toward the guest services manager, and within minutes the system began doing what I never could have done with a speech. A booking note appeared under Graham's business code. A floral delivery showed Brielle's name. A private car charge pointed to the address I had already seen in the rewards account, and the room had been billed under event hospitality. No one shouted, but the air changed around us, one glance at a time. Graham leaned close, his voice low and sharp. "You're making me look bad." I looked at the champagne in his hand, then at Brielle pretending not to watch us. "No, Graham. I'm standing exactly where you asked me to stand." By the time dessert plates reached the tables, Marissa's preservation letter had already landed with the hotel and the event company, and the records could no longer quietly disappear. After the gala, Graham stopped trying to look innocent and started trying to make me look unstable. He did not deny the suite, the flowers, or the car charges, because those records were already preserved. Instead, the story shifted overnight, polished by people who knew exactly how to wound a woman without leaving fingerprints. By morning, hospitality groups on Facebook and LinkedIn were whispering that I had staged a scene to force a better divorce, and Celia was telling her charity circle that independence had made me forget how marriage worked. The photo came next. It showed me in a coffee shop with Rowan, cropped so tightly that Marissa was gone from the table and the legal folder looked like a secret between lovers. People who had hugged me at holiday dinners suddenly posted careful little comments about never knowing what happens behind closed doors. A former coworker wrote that some women play quiet until money is involved, and someone from Graham's network replied with a heart. Dana slammed her laptop shut and reached for her phone, but I stopped her the same way I had stopped her before. "If you answer dirt with dirt, you only make mud." Marissa had warned me, and for once, I let the anger pass through my hands without giving it a place to land. Graham wanted a screenshot of me losing control. He wanted one messy post, one ugly sentence, one broken wife he could point to and say, "See, this is what I have been dealing with." So I stayed silent while Marissa did the only thing louder than outrage. She filed clean. By the next afternoon, the full coffee shop footage was attached to a legal notice, and there was Marissa sitting beside Rowan and me the entire time. Graham's email to the PR firm came next, with his own words asking them to push the narrative that I had an inappropriate relationship before the financial story got traction. The hotel's written confirmation followed, tying the riverfront suite, the flowers, and the car service to his business code, not to me. The same people who had called me calculated began deleting posts without apology, and my phone filled with private messages that said they hoped I was okay. I did not answer most of them. I watched Graham's story collapse in public, not because I shouted over it, but because every lie had finally met a receipt. Graham tried to make Brielle his last clean reason. By the time Marissa called us into a private settlement room downtown, he was no longer talking about love, damage, or anything he had broken. He walked in with Brielle beside him, one hand resting near her lower back, wearing the grave face of a man pretending responsibility had found him late. She is pregnant. Elise. I need this divorce handled quickly so I can do the right thing. I looked at Brielle first, not Graham, because her eyes were fixed on the folder in Marissa's hands, and fear had already started doing what guilt could not. Brielle had learned something before that meeting, and it had changed the way she stood beside him. Graham had drafted an email to his private attorney, calling her a public relations risk if the scandal grew, a phrase he never meant for her to see. The man who promised to bring her into daylight had already prepared a sentence that made her disposable. So she did not protect him. She gave Marissa the hotel messages, the gift records, the calendar screenshots, and the texts where Graham wrote that I was only a household problem until the sponsors calmed down. He told me the marriage was already over. Brielle breathed, her voice tight. But he never said I was just another file to manage. Graham turned on her so fast the room seemed to shrink around him. You handed them private messages? Brielle's mouth twisted. Not into innocence, but into the face of a woman finally seeing the bargain she had made. You were going to bury me the second I stopped helping you look decent. Then Marissa opened the sealed medical packet Brielle had agreed to provide after Graham made the pregnancy central to the divorce timeline. The result did not need drama. It only needed one clean sentence from Marissa, that the voluntary paternity test did not support Graham as the biological father. For the first time since I had known him, Graham had no version of himself ready. His hand slipped from Brielle's chair, his face draining as if the room had taken back every lie he had spent months arranging. I did not feel triumph the way I imagined I might. I felt the cold symmetry of it. He had replaced me with a story, and that story had replaced him with the truth. The legal ending did not arrive with thunder. It arrived in a quiet conference room where Graham sat beside his attorney. Thinner, older, and furious that paper could do what tears never had. Marissa laid out the marital assets, preserved hotel records, smear campaign, and damage Graham caused with his own emails. By the time the settlement was signed, I had favorable division, civil compensation, and the one thing he had fought hardest to keep from me, a clean name. Graham did not go to prison, and that almost made it worse for him. He had to stay in Chicago and watch the rooms close one by one. His company let him go quietly. Sponsors stopped returning calls, and men who once clapped his shoulder began looking past him in elevators. Celia lost her tables, her invitations, and the soft little circle of women who used to admire her family name. Brielle gave her statement, returned what had to be returned, and disappeared from the luxury event world because no brand wanted her face beside their launch anymore. 1 year later, I was in Portland, Oregon, running guest experience for a riverfront hotel that had become mine in every way. The lobby smelled like cedar, rain, and fresh coffee, and my name was printed on the program for an industry award I had earned without Graham's hand on my back. He appeared before the ceremony in an old suit, wearing a visitor badge, and asked if I could make one call for him. No one in Chicago answers anymore. Elise, he whispered, and for the first time, I heard no power in his voice. I looked at the badge on his jacket, then at the ballroom doors opening behind me. You left me outside because you thought I would stain your seat. I am not leaving you outside, Graham. I am just not opening this door for you. Rowan handed me a coffee near the entrance and asked, "Ready?" I looked at the room waiting for me and said, "I was ready the day I stopped begging to be chosen." If this story touched something you survived, leave one quiet line in the comments. Not to reopen the pain, but to mark the day you chose yourself, walked forward with your name intact, and still believed life could bring you a calmer love, a cleaner home, and a softer morning.